All right, hello everybody. We're rolling on the Kant study once again, comprehensive yet informal, as we always say. At least I think we always say it. Today we have the continuation of the introduction to the Transcendental Logic. So we have part 3 and 4, which have these titles that should tell you what's in them. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. That's what we're going to get into. And then we just have so this is a continuation of part 4.
More of a short note than an introduction.
Yeah.
Says, this is the Transcendental Analytic. It's like a paragraph at the end.
Oh, at the end, yes, yep. So we're going to introduce what we're doing next time at the end, as well as finish up this introduction to the Transcendental Logic as a more general thing before we get into what the analytic is, and the next time we'll actually get into the analytic, unless there's hella more introduction, which honestly I wouldn't be surprised. So.
There pretty much is.
Oh, there is?
You see the analytic of concepts.
Oh, and what's that? Is there actual,
And then you actually get into the analytic of concepts.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool. All right, well, that's what's coming up. So today, let's start at our starting point. That's probably a good thing. Oh, this is an interesting. The what is truth. I remember reading this and being like, whoa,
What doth life?
He is I think a correspondence theorist of sorts, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that Dr. Lee says this is a wide disagreement on what Kant is, but it seems to me that he's a correspondence theorist.
Yeah, that's what I got out of it when I read it.
This sentence really seems to sort of assume correspondence theory rather than argue it.
Yeah.
So
I think so too. Although maybe the assumption is built on his correspondence between intuitions and concepts, but we'll get into that. Do you have anything else to say before we just straight start reading into the?
No.
Okay. Do you want to start us off then?
Okay.
Here we go.
The old and famous question with which the logicians were to be driven into a corner and brought to such a pass that they must either fall into a miserable circle or else confess their ignorance, hence the vanity of their entire art, is this: what is truth? The nominal definition of truth, namely that it is the agreement of the cognition with its object, is here granted and presupposed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, see? But one demands to know what is the general and certain criterion of the truth of any cognition. So, like it says, we just threw around the term correspondence theory without really explaining that.
Oh, true. Yeah, we should do that. We should not assume that.
So, correspondence theory is a theory of truth, which basically says that truth involves. It's really hard to say it in a way other than the way he just said it.
Yeah, well, if you want a correspondence theory, it's right here, the nominal definition of truth. What he calls the nominal definition of truth, but that's what we're calling correspondence theory, and it's namely that is the agreement of cognition with its object. So it's like you think of an idea, and then you point to an object in the world, and then if they line up, that's truth. If they don't, it is falsehood.
But of course, what exactly constitutes lining up, and how would you know whether it lines up or not? Are other questions. But yeah, that's. See, I don't know why it's even controversial. Whether Kant, apparently it is controversial, but it is. I don't understand how it's controversial whether Kant is a correspondence theorist or not. Because I read that and it looks like, is this not the definition
of correspondence theory?
Correspondence
Which he
theory.
calls him. Maybe they're like, no, he's a nominalist, but in the sense of the nominal definition of truth.
Well, he's just saying that this nominal definition of truth doesn't really explain enough, right?
Which is, I guess, good, and also what I would say, because what you just asked,
Sure, absolutely, those are the issues for it. But he also was presupposed that this is the definition of truth, indeed.
Yeah, so I guess maybe an Aquinas-esque strategy, assume it, but then try to figure out how it works and argue for it, even though you already believe that it's the outcome.
Possibly, but I'm not sure that he actually manages to convincingly argue for it, because I think he does not take it seriously. He does not take alternative epistemologies where truth is not a correspondence very seriously, in my view. He doesn't really seem to address them much at all. I mean, he dismisses this and says right here it's trivial, right? The nominal definition of truth is of course granted and presupposed, but that's not enough. And like, why have you granted and presupposed that?
Oh yeah, I think it's because the way he thinks concepts correspond with intuitions. I feel like that has something to do with it. Although it would be helpful if he like straight up said that.
Well, according to him, it's not either. The concepts and the intuitions have to correspond to their object.
Oh, because that's what the cognition is.
Whereas, just as an
yeah, that's strange.
theory of truth, you could have some kind of functional vision of truth, right? Where if your actions are informed in a certain way by a certain set of propositions, that might constitute truth. For instance, I would ask, Kant later, this is very abstract, but Kant later will be like, we cannot know whether the universe is infinite or not. It's a contradiction to assume it's finite. But if it's infinite, then we can't have a cognition that actually mirrors the object because we can't have an infinite cognition. To which I say, but you've granted that it's not finite, and you haven't granted that it isn't infinite, so it seems to me that it's infinite. To which Kant's response is, you don't actually know that because you don't have a correspondence. And I'm like, okay, but I know to not expect a limit at any point, right? So I know if there are limitations, it seems like that's some kind of knowledge to me.
Yes,
anyway.
I would agree. That's more. Yeah, this almost seems like empirical to me. I don't know, like, unless it means like it also includes like abstract objects, but like.
I'm not sure what you mean by calling it empirical.
Because if a cognition needs to line up with an object, like isn't like
the object could be itself. The object could be itself. According
like
to
could an
Kant,
object be like as abstract as like a proposition or something? Or?
Well, give me an example of a proposition. A non-empirical proposition.
Like if 2 + 2 = 4, does that need to line up with an object to know?
According to Kant, that would line up to the object of time.
Oh, well, time's not an object; it's an intuition.
Intuitions can be objects of cognition.
Oh, yeah, so that's what I was asking. I was like, do objects of cognition, I guess, count as objects? Okay,
yes.
Sure, okay.
Well, explicitly, right? Because Kant says we only have appearances, right? So objects can only be representations, or at least objects for us that we can have cognition and knowledge about can only be representations, right? Never things in themselves.
Right, but it's just I want to know how abstract of a representation an object could be. Because it's
pretty abstract.
Okay, cool. All right, well then I think it's settled, at least for now. Maybe something later will contradict and we'll be like, oh, maybe that's why we think he's not a correspondence theorist. But as of now, it's very clear that he
it seems like it's a correspondence theory, and it seems like that's also, I mean, this has been maybe my biggest theory, my biggest problem with Kant, period, is that it seems like he simply assumes correspondence theory.
Yeah.
And the consequences of his assumption of correspondence theory are problematic, right? Namely, especially with that infinite universe example.
So we can continue and see how he deals with this, if he does at all.
I'll read the next paragraph because it's short.
Okay.
It is already a great and necessary proof of cleverness or insight to know what one should reasonably ask. For if the question is absurd in itself and demands unnecessary answers, then, besides the embarrassment of the one who proposes it, it also has the disadvantage of misleading the incautious listener into absurd answers, and presenting the ridiculous sight, as the ancient said, of one person milking a billy goat while the other holds a scythe underneath.
What is a scythe? I don't understand this picture.
Probably for gathering milk.
Okay.
The issue is milking a male goat, which, interesting choice there, Kant.
Yeah. You never know when you're gonna find the goat dick joke in the Critique of Pure Reason. Surprise!
You never know when you're gonna find a goat dick joke in the Critique of Pure Reason.
What is truth? Classic philosophical conundrum. Goat dick joke. Next paragraph.
True.
Okay, let me actually see what this says, because that made me forget the meaning of this whole.
He's saying.
You're basically
it's very
saying.
simple. He's saying don't ask stupid questions.
Yeah.
Because if you ask stupid questions, you might get stupid answers. The smarter version of that is there are some questions which the very asking of which is misleading and can give us a wrong answer. For instance, how many angels may dance on the head of a pin? Right? Those kind of that's the classic example. Or when did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah, it's
Right.
just like, what the fuck?
And
Yeah.
Kant is saying, don't ask stupid questions like, when did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah.
It's going to lead you into false places.
To milking a billy,
His example
milking a billy goat.
is milking a billy goat. So.
All right. Got it. Kant, thanks. Okay. Moving on. If truth consists in the agreement of a cognition with its object, so correspondence theory. Then this object must thereby be distinguished from the others. For a cognition is false if it does not agree with the object which is related, even if it contains something that could well be valid of other objects. So this is, I'm seeing how like someone like Hegel would be like, come on man, don't throw away all the, just because it's not right with this object doesn't mean it can't be right with other ones. And Kant is like, but no, it's still false. Whereas other philosophers may be more forgiving. But anyway, now a general criterion of truth would be that which was valid of all cognitions without any distinction among their objects. But it is clear that since with such a criterion one abstracts from all content of cognition relation to its object, yet truth concerns precisely this content, it would be completely impossible and absurd to ask for a mark of truth of this content of cognition. And thus it is clear that a sufficient and yet at the same time general sign of truth cannot possibly be provided. Since above we have called the content of cognition its matter, one must therefore say that no general sign of the truth of the matter of cognition can be demanded because it is self-contradictory. Okay. So the first part of this paragraph is kind of like going more into correspondence theory. And then he says, he's talking about the criterion.
Yeah, he seems to generally be saying we can't ask for a general criterion of any kind of truth whatsoever.
Yeah, because it's self-contradictory.
Well, the self-contradiction seems to be that truth should give us content about objects, right?
Mm.
It should tell us something meaningful about the object.
Mm-hmm.
But that means distinguishing one object from another.
Mm.
But if we do that, then there is no general criterion of truth. Rather, there are distinctive criterions of truth for each object.
Different object.
Yes, right. For instance, of existent and non-existent things, there would be different criterions of the truth of the statement of the existence or non-existence of a thing.
Right. So trying to find what is general truth is maybe a bad endeavor, philosophically speaking.
Well,
is what he's saying.
A general criterion for truth.
Yes.
A general
like way to verify.
Way to verify whether something is true or not. Yeah.
So So attacking Descartes maybe, or on the most modern philosophers, I guess, because doesn't each one provide at least some sort of criterion of truth, whether it's like Descartes' clear and distinctness criterion, or David Hume's either it's fact or it's either a matter of fact or a like mathematical
relation of ideas.
Relation of it, yeah.
Relation of ideas or matter of fact.
Yeah. So this
That's
is
Hume's fork.
Yeah. So this is kind of like attacking that kind of mindset, right? Where it's like, don't try to come up with these criterions generally.
Well, I actually think it works for it doesn't work on Hume because Hume has two different kinds of truth, right? Two distinctive ones, namely relations of ideas and matters of fact. Right?
Okay.
The relation of idea, in Hume's view, because Hume probably would not admit the analytic synthetic distinction.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a leap.
Well,
I probably overinterpreted Hume, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Hume would not admit the analytic synthetic distinction, and that's how he would avoid becoming a Kantian, right? Relations of ideas becomes analytic a priori, right? And the mark of its truth is whether it contradicts itself or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then a posteriori truth, right, matters of fact, have a different criterion of truth. So I think Hume actually avoids this by having distinctive forms of truth, right? relative ideas in that.
For each kind of object.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but Descartes certainly would be indicted by this because his criterion is simply clarity and distinctness.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Although it's not clear how that indictment actually plays out.
Yeah, that's the kind. I'm like, I feel like I understand that, but I don't know really what that means totally.
Yeah. So he says, it is clear without such criterion, one abstracts from all content of cognition. So Descartes, abstracting from all content of cognition, says, is it clear and distinct? Then only then can it be truth.
Mm-hmm.
But he says truth concerns precisely the content.
Right.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't an indictment of Descartes.
Yeah.
But at least I can say that he is saying generally that there is no single criterion of truth.
Because it has to do with content and not truth itself.
Right. The content being the distinctiveness.
Okay, so maybe it's not, because modern philosophers usually try to look at content and be like, what are attributes of this content that make it true? So maybe modern philosophers are safe. I'm trying to think of like who he's indicted, because clearly like this is an attack on something. Like he didn't just pull this thing out of his ass just to like argue against it, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to figure out where in the history of philosophy this would be a...
It seems like if anywhere it would be Descartes, but it's just not clear to me in what way has Descartes, has Descartes, in saying that true statement is clear and distinct, has he abstract from all content of cognition? It seems like no.
Yeah. So where is Kant getting this from? Did he just
then it wouldn't be
actually...
the general criterion of truth is what Kant would need to say, right? But it is. It seems like it is a general criterion of truth.
Yeah. I'm thinking he might have just made this up and been like, don't do this.
Did he invent a problem in his own head?
Maybe he was like, maybe when he was like trying to come up with this thing or trying to like beat Hume, he went down this road and was like, oh no, this is bad. I don't know. Kant, I don't know where you're getting this, but I guess I agree, even though I can't think of an example that someone else has done where it like kind of demonstrates that. I guess it kind of makes sense on its own.
But it does really seem like clarity and distinctness is a single criterion of truth.
Yes, I mean, when it was taught to me, it was described that way, but maybe...
It's a single general criterion of truth. But I still don't see what's absurd about that.
Yeah, me neither, because it's dealing with the content still. It's saying this content needs to be clear and distinct.
Right, and he's saying that such a criterion, one would abstract...
It's probably if we look earlier, this is about like logicians. So maybe like they're like maybe they aren't philosophers, but maybe logician.
Logician too, though.
No, he is, but he's also in terms of giving the criterion. That's him being philosopher. That's not him trying to derive rules. Oh, this is what that is. This is probably trying to. Maybe this is like something more like what Bertrand Russell will try to do in the future, where like along with Whitehead, was it? Mm-hmm. Where they tried to write deduce truth to like logic itself. I think that's what Descartes is attacking, or not Descartes. I think that's what Kant here is attacking.
Possibly.
That would make a lot more sense.
I think we should probably move forward with this confusion.
I just really want to figure out like what this means and give a good example. But
I would, but maybe it'll become clear to us as we read on.
Okay, true. For now, I'm thinking it's the Russell thing, but let's move on and see.
Possibly. It does seem like, Russell came after Descartes.
No, I know, but I'm just thinking, I think Russell maybe fell into this. Anyway, all right, let's move on. But concerning the mere form of cognition, setting aside all content, it is equally clear that a logic, so far as it expounds the general and necessary rules of understanding.
See, that's a perfect example, if I can interrupt you. Now I understand it completely.
Okay.
Right? Concerning the mere form of cognition, setting aside all content, according to Kant, right, clarity and distinctness does concern the mere form of cognition. So, remember, what is the content and what is the form in cognition for Kant?
Intuitions and concepts?
Intuition
is the form.
Right, exactly. Well, sort of. Intuitions is the form and concepts are the content, except when you have the pure intuition of time and space, which of course provides form to intuition itself.
Yeah.
So form and content are relative things, right? Mm-hmm. In any given circumstance. But the content for empirical intuition, for example, would be this is red, this is blue, this is green, etc. So to say, for instance, that all things which are true when they are red or blue or green, right? A representation is accurate when it meets such and such empirical criterion would be, of course, to contradict yourself, because then you wouldn't even have such a thing as blueness or greenness or redness if every object it were true that it's green. Did that make any sense?
I think so.
So the idea here being the content is the content being like the for lack of a better word, tangible properties of the cognition, right? The suchness, right? Well, if the suchness of all cognitions, if there were a general criterion for such and such a suchness making the cognition a true one, then that suchness or property would have to be true of all objects, in which case it would be pointless to even say that such a property exists.
Yeah, okay. To get actual, like, meaningful truth, we have to
distinguish one thing from another. I think now that's what that's meant.
Which I still don't think that's Descartes, because Descartes doesn't think everything's clear.
No, that's not Descartes. That's definitely not Descartes.
Yeah.
Because now that I'm seeing concerning...
I still think this is Russell.
No, but I don't think it's Descartes or Russell. I think it's a straw man he invented in his own head.
Oh, okay.
Although not necessarily a straw man, but just like a necessary... Obviously, we have to rule this out because it's absurd.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, well...
Because he says, concerning the mere form of cognition, when we think about clarity and distinctness, is that about the content or form? What do you think?
Go ahead, sorry, what was...
When we think about the criterion of clarity and distinctness in Descartes, is that a matter of content or form?
I think content.
I would think form.
Because because Descartes... Oh! Well, okay, so Descartes starts with content and then tries to go more broadly into form.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking of the beginning of the Meditations where he's like, we would have to go through every single thing, but he's like, oh no, we don't have to do that, we can do form.
Exactly.
Okay.
He abstracts away from the content of objects. And his criterion is setting aside all content concerning the mere form of cognition. So, I guess just start.
Descartes owned, okay. Okay.
Descartes owned? Not yet. No.
Okay. Okay. For that which contradicts these is false, since the understanding thereby contradicts its general rules of thinking, and thus concerned as an organon, is always a logic of illusion. That is, it's dialectical. For since it teaches us nothing about the content of cognition, but only the formal conditions of agreement with the understanding, which are entirely indifferent with regard to the objects, the effrontery, I don't know what that means, of using it as a tool, organon.
Being an affront.
Which is what?
Being an affront, but you also skipped. You're on the wrong page.
What?
You're on 199.
Oh, shoot. So do I have... Oh no, it's not here.
Uh-oh. Looks like we're probably going to have to stop the recording.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully I'll remember to part one this and throw this together in the editor. Alright, we're back. Minor technical error. I somehow missed a page. Which is very unfortunate as well because we were in like the middle of a fairly difficult, at least difficultly worded thing. So I'm going to start, I'll just start this paragraph again and just so we can get the momentum back. My apologies. Okay, but concerning the mere form of cognition, setting aside all content, which is what we just talked about before the stop, it is equally clear that a logic, so far as it expounds the general and necessary rules of understanding, must present criteria of truth in these very rules. For that which contradicts these is false, since the understanding thereby contradicts its general rules of thinking, and thus contradicts itself. But these criteria concern only the form of truth, that is, of thinking in general, and are to that extent entirely correct, but not sufficient. For although a cognition may be in incomplete accord with logical form, that is, it doesn't contradict itself, yet it can still always contradict the object. The merely logical criterion of truth, namely the agreement of a cognition with the general and formal laws of understanding and reason, is therefore certainly the conditio sine qua non, and thus the negative condition of all truth. Further, however, logic cannot go, and the error that concerns not form but content cannot be discovered by any touchstone of logic. Okay, I understand, I think, what he's saying now. He's not saying that Descartes was wrong, he's saying Descartes didn't go far enough.
Well,
If we're using the language and analogy of last...
I'm not sure that this is even Descartes, because the clarity and distinctionness is probably not the same as non-contradiction, right?
Well, I think it's at least part of it. Because
Well,
if something's
part of it,
contradictory,
but
it's not clear and distinct.
Sure, well, most certainly. But I don't think it's enough for something to be non-contradictory for it to be clearly and distinctly perceived.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, so it's not totally Descartes, but I'm just trying to draw an analogy to help paint the picture.
I think it's very simple. All he's saying here is, yes, of course, non-contradiction is a criterion of truth,
But we need
namely the
more.
form of truth.
Yeah.
But it's insufficient.
Yeah, we need more. We need to actually examine the object.
Not
Because I could-
everything which is non-contradictory is true.
Yeah, I could say, this is a white chair that I'm sitting in, and that's not contradictory. Whiteness and chairness is,
Yeah, I could say that I'm riding Pegasus right now. No contradiction seems to exist.
that does not mean it's true.
Although, not if you ask Drew or me.
Uh,
Not if you ask Drew or me.
oh yeah.
We've come to the view that such descriptions of objects are phrased in such a way that it would be contradictory to say this, so I actually don't agree.
Yeah, I don't. I just mean, this is purely. You have to think of where Kant is coming from.
I mean, it's the more intuitive viewpoint is that non-contradiction doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. Yes. But Kant doesn't think that's enough. He thinks that if something is because of the whole nature of the a posteriori, right? It's he thinks it's very purely contingent, which is not something
Right.
that things like Spinoza or Hegel or other things
Exactly.
people would say.
Right.
But because it's contingent, if you say a false thing about it, there is a contradiction there
Right.
in Kant's viewpoint.
Contingency is the intuitive viewpoint.
Right, which is not. I don't think it's correct either. But this is Kant, and we're going with Kant. So for the sake of understanding Kant.
He asserts
Yes.
fairly intuitively that there are things which are non-contradictory and yet not true. And it was easy to give examples of things which he would assert are A, not true, and B, not contradictory. I just think that there is, in fact, a hidden contradiction if you analyze it.
Yeah, I would agree. But Kant does not, so Leibnizian Wolffian tradition L, moving on.
Yes, let's continue.
Yeah.
General logic analyzes the entire formal business of the understanding and reason into its elements, and presents these as principles of all logical assessment of our cognition. This part of logic can therefore be called an analytic, and is on that very account the least negative touchstone, at least the negative touchstone of truth, since one must before all else examine and evaluate by means of these rules the form of cognition before investigating its content to find out whether, with regard to the object, it contains positive truth. But since the mere form of cognition, however, may agree, since the mere form of cognition, however well it may agree with logical laws, is far from sufficing to constitute the material or objective truth of the cognition, nobody can dare to judge of objects and to assert anything about them merely with logic without having drawn on antecedently well-found information about them from outside of logic, in order subsequently merely to investigate
Writing.
in order subsequently merely to investigate its use and connection in a coherent whole according to logical laws, or better, solely to examine them according to such laws. Nevertheless, there is something so seductive in the possession of an apparent art of giving all of our cognitions the form of understanding, even though with regard to their content, one may be very empty and poor, that this general logic, which is merely a canon for judging, has been used as if it were an organon for the actual production of at least the semblance of objective assertion, and thus in fact it has thereby been misused. Now, general logic, as a putative organon, is called dialectic, but he's using that as like derogatory.
Yeah, yes, he is. He's not a fan of contradicting nor dialectic at all. Which is why the ending of this book, which, spoiler alert, ends in human reason necessarily drawing itself to contradictions, is not something Kant probably particularly finds enjoyable, nor readers of Kant who have been agreeing with him up to that point. They were like, what the hell? What do you mean I can't understand God and I'm just drawn to eternal contradiction? This sucks. So if you are in that viewpoint, then, that's, sorry. That sucks. If you're like other philosophers,
skill issue,
faculty issue. If you're like Hegel, or other philosophers, like maybe there is something inherent to contradiction that is the human reason, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we were looking at it wrong, and maybe things aren't purely contingent and other cool insights, which I mean have been shown before, but Kant brings it to a new light.
That's how you know if you're virgin Kantian.
Yeah. if you're too scared to go outside and touch contradiction, and you want to stay inside with your analytic,
I mean, really, it's the exact opposite, isn't it? Because he's like, you need to touch grass to figure out truth. And
yes.
Hegel's like, just sit in your room. It came to me in the dream.
Yeah, which is funny because he also. Well, the reason though is because he thinks outside is contingent. So yes, he is saying touch grass, but his idea of grass is flawed in my opinion. If grass isn't this contingent, like worse bullshit, then I don't know. Kant, I think it's very Platonic in this way. He places primacy over the necessary conditions, and he doesn't view the a posteriori things as in nearly as positive of a light. There's a reason I think he chose to critique pure reason. But anyway, I think I'm getting off on a tangent here. I definitely am. So the beginning of this paragraph seems to be just kind of espousing more and more detail what we were saying before about what we were just saying now about, you have to go out and touch the object to get, not touch it literally, but, experience the object and analyze it to fully constitute truth, because it's something.
Well, not if it's an a priori object like time.
Okay, yes, I keep thinking object. I keep thinking he means empirical object.
But what he's really saying here is that logic alone cannot be used to attain truth.
Yes, you need,
because all you could attain.
You need objects that logic will analyze as well.
Right, because what logic gives you is laws of form that avoid non-contradiction. But since non-contradiction is not enough to assert truth, right, logic merely is a negative precondition for truth, and more is needed, once again. So you cannot produce truth with logic alone.
Yes, and then at the end, or not the very end, but he was saying something interesting, and I wanted to bring it up. Nevertheless, there is something so seductive in the possession of an apparent art for giving all our cognitions the form of understanding, even though with their regard to their content, one may yet be very empty and poor. This general logic, which is canon for judging, use it organon for actual reduction of the semblance of objective assertions. So, is he just drawing that out more?
He's basically just saying that people do, in fact, use logic alone to try and assert truth.
And they're empty and poor.
Yeah, it's empty and poor, and that's what he calls dialectic.
Right, because yes, general logic as a putative organon is called dialectic, and that's negative. Okay, cool. That's not good. Yeah, I think that's that paragraph.
It's positive, and that's the problem. It's positive, and that's the problem.
Oh, yes.
Right, it's positing something. When the use of logic should be merely negative and regulatory for Kant, not positing anything. Because
the understanding, as we touched on in the introduction and the aesthetic, the beginning of this, all of this has been reinforcing the understanding cannot, produce. It can't do the job that receptivity does, that the sensibility does. So definitely enforcing that idea again here in that paragraph. moving on, as different as the significance of the employment of this designation of science or art among the ancients may have been, one can still infer from their actual use of it that among them it was nothing other than the logic of illusion, a sophistical art for giving to its ignorance, indeed even to its intentional tricks, the air of truth by imitating the method of thoroughness which logic prescribes in general, and using its topics for the embellishment of every empty presentation. Presentation, bruh. Yeah, so he's just kind of reinforcing this. Sophists do this. If you don't know what sophist is, it's kind of what he says here, where they give the air of truth to things that are really empty.
He's saying Plato did it, and Aristotle.
Well, he's kind of saying the ancients did, right?
Right.
Which includes the sophists as well. But
yes, but like not just
the
sophists.
True.
I think he's like coming after Plato here,
yes.
right? Plato is pro-dialectic, and he tries to use pure logic, and he said he's calling Plato a sophist. He's putting the glove down, as it were.
Right. Okay. So that's what he's saying there. And then now one can take it as a certain and useful warning that general logic, considered as an organon, is always a logic of illusion, that is, it's dialectical. For since it teaches us nothing at all about the content of cognition, but only the formal conditions of agreement with the understanding, which are entirely different with regard to the objects, the effrontery of using it as a tool, okay, I get why I was so confused now, really, organon, for an expansion and extension of its information, or at least the pretension of so doing, comes down to nothing but idle chatter, asserting or preaching whatever one wants with some plausibility. So this is like, I don't know, almost a very Wittgensteinian rant, just about saying, so I just explain what this is wrong, and people do it, and those people are wrong.
Gotcha.
Am I missing anything there, do you think?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Do you want, or I'll just finish this up since it's short. You can do the next section. Such instruction by no means benefits the dignity of philosophy. For this reason, it would be better to call this designation dialectic as a critique of dialectical illusion, which is counted as part of logic, and in such a way we would have so many W's, and in such a way we would here have it to be understood. I don't know why that was so difficult.
In such a way we would here have it be understood. Yarr!
Yeah.
Right. In such a way, we would here have it be understood, matey.
Yeah. Should have cast Kant in Pirates of the Caribbean if he were alive.
That's probably a German thing. They just didn't want to change the German word order somehow.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think we've covered everything, honestly. There's a lot of repetition and digging into these quote-unquote sophists.
So good.
Number 4, section 4, yay, the last one of this introduction. Woohoo.
On the division of transcendental logic into the transcendental analytic and dialectic. In the transcendental logic, we isolate the understanding, as we did above with sensibility in the transcendental aesthetic, and elevate from our cognition merely the part of our thought that has its origin solely in the understanding. The use of this pure cognition, however, depends on this as its condition, that objects are given to us in intuition, to which it can be applied. For without intuition, all our cognition would lack objects, and therefore remain completely empty. The part of transcendental logic, therefore, that expounds the elements of the pure condition of the understanding, and the principles without which no object can be thought at all, is the transcendental analytic, and at the same time a logic of truth. For no cognition can contradict it without, at the same time, losing all content, i.e., all relation to any object, hence all truth. But because it is very enticing and seductive to make use of these pure cognitions of the understanding and principles by themselves, even beyond the bounds of all experience, which, however, itself alone can give us matter, objects, to which the pure concepts of the understanding can be applied, the understanding falls into the danger of making material use of merely formal principles of pure understanding through empty sophistries and of judging without distinction about objects that are not given to us, which perhaps indeed could not be given to us in any way. Since it should properly be only a canon for the assessment of empirical use, it is misused if one lets it count as an organon of general and unrestricted use, and dares to synthetically judge, assert, and decide about objects in general with the pure understanding alone. The use of the pure understanding would in this case therefore be dialectical. The second part of the Transcendental Logic must therefore be a critique of this dialectical illusion, and is called Transcendental Dialectic, not as an art of dogmatically arousing such illusion, an unfortunately highly prevalent art among the manifold works of metaphysical jugglery, but rather as a critique of the understanding and reason in regard to their hyperphysical use, in order to uncover the false illusion of their groundless pretensions and reduce their claims to invention and amplification, putatively to be attained through transcendental principles, to the mere assessment and evaluation of the pure understanding, guarding it against sophistical tricks.
All right, so we have our division.
Right.
One is going to be an actual quote-unquote, what for Kant is a quote-unquote proper analysis of the pure understanding, as it's very similar, he says, to what we did in the aesthetic, which was, dealt with more sensibility, even though it involved the understanding as well. So similarly, it's going to, do that, except focus this time focus on the understanding. And then the dialectic, that part, which comes much later, even though he's giving us a little peek of it now, its introduction, that part is going to be dedicated to looking at reason and it's what he calls hyperphysical use. And then he goes on to say, in order to uncover the false illusion of their groundless pretensions, reduce their claims to invention and amplification. So that's what he thinks is going on with claims that are going to be analyzed in the Transcendental Dialectic, the details of which will be revealed. Then when we get to it, which will probably be honestly very long from now, so read ahead if you want to, but we'll get there when we get there. Anything you
Yeah, this division reminds me of Parmenides, right? He has the way of truth and the way of opinion.
I don't know, I barely read Parmenides.
But, the way of opinion is lost anyway. But the idea is like, here, I'm going to write two philosophical works. One is right and the other is wrong.
Yeah, okay, you're right, yeah. But Kant thinks it's important for us to know this so we can stop doing what he calls metaphysical jugglery.
Right.
Interesting choice of words as always.
The Transcendental Dialectic is oddly much more interesting and useful, in my opinion.
Yes, because we don't think everything there is merely metaphysical jugglery.
Well, he sort of brings the system to life as explaining, well, here how it's metaphysical jugglery, and in a sense he's right.
Yes.
I don't think any of the traditional arguments for God's existence survive.
No, I don't. I agree, and that's what's so powerful. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this study in general, but also, I think there's more than what he. I mean, obviously you know this, but for us and post-Kantians, this opens up a whole new kind of like thinking, which is initially talked down upon, we can see even here in this introduction, but they look to get around that, and that will be a mission of post-Kantian philosophy,
right.
Partially that, and also getting rid of that numinous shit. But
sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that interests me in this rereading is the fact that although I disagree strongly with these premises, this transcendental analytic that seems to make his dialectical critique of what he calls illusion possible. It seems flawed in the foundation, and yet the dialectical critique seems to work anyway.
Yeah, that's This book is so back.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that's another reason I wanted to do this. I don't know if I had that exact worked it out to that much detail that you just described, but I did know there was something interesting that we have the analytic and then we have the dialectic in the same book, and they're treated the same way, but one's right and one's wrong, and I'm but the wrong part is the part that everybody. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to dive into this really, detail for detail and really understand it, so we can, do things like that and see the
Transcendental
impact.
Analytic to me is sort of the real meat of the book, and it's also part of where I got lost.
Yeah, so that's another reason why. These are all great reasons. So this is great because when we were going over the introduction of the book, and we were Kant is making these dog shit arguments. I'm not backing him up. Like what value is there in this book? And I'm like, don't worry, we're gonna get there, especially towards the Transcendental Logic. Now we're finally seeing how it's starting to get interesting, and maybe, it was interesting before, especially maybe if you haven't been exposed to Transcendental Aesthetic before. But
the doctrine of elements is already interesting, time and space.
Yeah, no, it's not that it's uninteresting. It's just when you see the fullness of the impact of this work, I think we're getting to a big chunk of that.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm excited. Seems based.
Right. We're continuing.
We
have
to this, right? The Transcendental Analytic.
Yes, the Transcendental.
So yes, I just wanted to say that because I wanted to touch on those little comments, the Dialectic. But we're not there yet. We're starting the Analytic, which is a big part, and we're gonna end this session by introducing it to you. So yeah, we can get started, I think, on that.
I just read.
Oh, you did just read. Okay, I just talked for a long time. That's probably why I was about to hand it off to you. Okay, I'm going to talk some more, but this time read Kant's words translated into English. This Analytic is the analysis of the entirety of our a priori cognition into the elements of the pure cognition of the understanding. It is concerned with the following points. 1, that the concepts be pure and not empirical concepts. 2, that they belong not to intuition and to sensibility, but rather to thinking and understanding. 3, that they be elementary concepts and clearly distinguished from those which are derived or composed from them. 4, that the table of them be complete and that they entirely exhaust the entire field of pure understanding. Entirely exhaust the entire field of pure understanding. Writing. God, anyway. Now, this completeness of a science cannot reliably be assumed from a rough calculation of an aggregate put together by mere estimates. Hence, it is possible only by means of an idea of the whole of the a priori cognition of the understanding, and through the division of concepts that such an idea determines and that constitutes it. Thus, only through their connection in a system. The pure understanding separates itself completely not only from everything empirical, but even from all sensibility, which includes the pure intuitions of time and space. So he's basically saying concepts and not intuitions, I think. It is therefore a unity that subsists on its own, which is sufficient by itself, and which is not to be supplemented by any external additions. Hence, the sum total of its cognition will constitute a system that is to be grasped and determined under one idea, the completeness and articulation of which system can at the same time yield a touchstone of the correctness and genuineness of all the pieces of cognition fitting into it. This whole part of the Transcendental Logic, however, consists of 2 books, the first of which contains the concepts of pure understanding, and the second, its principles. So now this division of this book we're getting into, he's saying has 2 books.
Right. Well, before he says that,
I just wanted to point that out, that we're in for a journey. But anyway, yes, there's actual philosophical content here as well.
First division, second part, chapter 3, first subsection. Yeah. That's how he does things.
God, it's like a really anxiety-inducing, I don't know, like when someone has like a bunch of tabs inside of groups that are inside of monitors. It's just like, wow.
It's like Attack on Titan, the final season, part 4.
Yeah.
And the parts are all released separately from each other at the same distance as a normal season. My dude, you have 7 seasons.
Yeah.
Anyway.
To the philosophical content,
right.
I think Kant is just repeating a lot of the same.
Well, he begins by saying basically that the Transcendental Analytic needs to be complete.
Yes.
And also needs to not contain any additional things, right? And needs to be only pure understanding, no sensibility, not even pure intuitions, right? Mm. And therefore, it has to be assembled in a non-haphazard way so that we know it's complete.
Yes. Otherwise, we might fall into the,
Otherwise, we'd just be guessing, right? right? These are how many concepts. How do I know? It came to me in a dream, right? So his idea is, in order to come up with a coherent, complete list of these concepts, these pure concepts, he needs to start with the idea of a whole. And it's not entirely clear what that is to me, but I think he's probably getting at apperception.
Maybe.
Right, this idea of the self-perceiving subject. What does a self-perceiving subject need at its bare minimum?
Yes,
in order to have concepts. I think that's what he's getting at.
Yes.
But that is looking ahead. For right now, all we know is that there is an idea of the whole of a priori cognition of the understanding. And therefore, he's going to divide that into its absolutely necessary parts. And that would be the concepts of the pure understanding.
Yep.
He doesn't really say what the principles would be.
Nope, he just says there are principles.
And then there are principles.
Yep. But don't worry, he does go into them. Yeah.
Later.
But they are there. So
they're there. There are principles.
Be assured, dear Kantian.
And stay tuned for more.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it, right? I think for this.
Yeah, I think it is.
Cool. All right, so we got lots of pure understanding content coming your way. Stay tuned and attend to the pure understanding faculty. Not the faculty of sensibility. Do not attend to that right now. We're not there. We've passed that already. We've done that. Look back if you want to attend.
No more attending to your sensible faculties. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as you can, anyway. Which, yeah, you can't ever fully do that, probably. Even though Kant says maybe you, I don't know. I'll stop here. This is a good...
Well, simply attend to your faculties and you'll know.
Fuck off, Kant. Okay.
Just attend to your faculties, bro.
Faculty issue. I can't do that. All right. We'll see you next time for more.
Attend to your faculties.
Yeah, attend to your faculties. Then we're going to be attending the faculty of the pure understanding. Yippee! Yippee!